Hey there, welcome back to Podcast for Your Life, the podcast where we share thoughts from our life for yours. Jam is here today.
Hey.
And we are going to be talking about a super meta topic, podcasts.
Podcasts. This topic was suggested by my friend Chad. Hey, Chad.
Hey, Chad. Thanks for suggesting such a meta topic.
We weren't sure if you were kidding or not, but we took it seriously, and we think it's a great idea.
Yep, we're calling your bluff.
Yeah, absolutely.
If not like you were bluffing, but we're calling it.
And if you weren't, then great suggestion.
That's right. Yeah, I think this is a topic that we both enjoy and do a lot of. So, like, on both sides, sending and receiving.
Yeah.
So, let's get down to the nitty gritty. What is a podcast?
A podcast, I think, would be best described as sort of like the next, stage of basically radio.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a lot of discussions, it's storytelling, it's things that have occurred on radio for a long time. But what's so nice about it is the format has changed. So there's no real limits on length per se. You can download them. They're always free, like radio is, other than having a device to listen to radio. Radio's free. You can listen to different shows. You can take them on the go. You can download them so that you can listen to them at any time instead of it being live only. And anyone can make one. So it's kind of like completely decentralized radio that's still free, but is not confined to the technology of, original AM/FM radio.
Yeah, and I would say it's definitely like an audio production where it's all audio.
Yes.
There's no visuals to go along with it. There are plenty of people nowadays who like record their podcasts and film themselves doing it, kind of like a vlog sort of deal.
Yeah.
But I think podcast in the traditional sense is that it's just like people talking, or it's some sort of interview, or it's
journalistic storytelling kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think
the people that are doing that, where they film the podcast being taped at the same time, I think they're just trying to do two birds with one stone, because there's some people who will be maybe more apt to want to watch a discussion, and other people like myself, which actually would depend on the discussion, will be more apt to just listen to it in the car or something. Yeah. And so that way, basically accomplishing both in the same moment. And so, but I think most people would only go for one or the other, either they're going to watch it or they're going to listen to it. So,
I think, I would agree that it's kind of like, for me, I think a lot of podcasts are the listening format. What's some of your like podcast listening habits?
I love listening to podcasts in the car. I almost never have another time to do that. I have a somewhat long commute, so I have a 45, 50-minute commute each way. So, it's about an hour and a half a day.
Nice.
Which is a good amount of listening time. So I like podcasts because there's quite a few of them that are a little bit longer form, and so you have time to get into a story, or if there's a series, a podcast where it's, one story told over several episodes or whatever, I really like that because I have plenty of time to listen to it. But if not, if I didn't have that kind of time or I had a shorter drive, I would definitely go for some shorter podcasts. Yeah. I love podcasts that are story-based for the most part, but there's some informational ones that I like to listen to that would be sort of more on the info side instead of like storytelling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I'd be similar. I don't have as much time to listen to it in the car because my wife sometimes likes just to kind of have nothing going on and we carpool to work, so that's cool. But I wake up in the morning a lot of times, and after doing stuff, getting ready for the day, sometimes I'll listen to a podcast while eating breakfast or getting ready for to go to work or whatever. So that's cool.
I remember when I first had, part of why I always listen in the car is I first had my like sort of podcast like awakening, where I realized what they were and how cool they were and everything. Whenever I first moved to college, anytime I'd go back home to visit my parents and then drive back, I had a 3-hour drive each way. And it was like, man, I want to listen to something. And I started getting into some podcasts, and some of the ones that captivated me really early were story-based ones where you can really have time to go get in depth with it, and it makes drives go by very quickly. But it's so nice because it's audio based, just like what captivated people about radio. You're able to do other things while you're listening to this and be very, very engaged, and yet still be able to drive and not be distracted. And it was kind of amazing. I just realized, it's so simple. People had been talking about podcasts for years, and I hadn't had a reason or need to really explore it yet. But I remember that year, it was like 2011. I took a deep dive into podcasts, and I would be excited about my drive to go back to my parents' house, and then just as excited to come back to where I was going to college, because I had like a long queue of podcasts that I was excited about listening to.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, when I was in college, I listened to like purely music. I didn't listen to any podcasts and didn't even start doing podcasts until probably 1 or 2 years ago. Like being a regular podcast listener.
Yeah.
Because I think during college, I was so overwhelmed with all the things I was learning. And so I was kind of like education overload that I just didn't want to learn anything else. And now that I'm like a couple years removed from college, I feel like my desire to keep learning kicked in again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm learning all these cool things that are enjoyable now. But I think during college, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have so many textbooks and so many school-related thoughts through my head. I don't have any space for.
Yeah.
At least that's how I was.
Yeah.
But now they're pretty cool. One thing I think overwhelms me at times is the amount of podcasts out there. That's why when any time someone tells us, oh yeah, listen to your episode from Podcast for Your Life, I'm like, oh man, I'm honored you spent, or maybe some of you would say, you wasted 15 minutes listening to our stuff when you could listen to like 1 million other podcasts out there.
Yeah.
It sometimes can be a little overwhelming. And I guess the question is, why are there so many podcasts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's probably a good thing that there's so many, because it kind of shows that it's working, meaning like anyone can make one. Now you might not have the best equipment or whatever it is, but literally anyone in this day and age could make one. You could use your phone to record, or your laptop, or whatever, and it doesn't cost anything to put it up there on the sort of the podcast apps. And I think that's really cool. It does make it hard to sift through a lot of the content to find, the podcasts that would really be enjoyable to you.
Sure.
But what I have found is that because there's so many, it allows for there to be really, really niche podcasts that could actually find an audience. So some dude in some random state, like Washington State, way over somewhere else where I'm never spending time or whatever, could happen to do a podcast that is very niche topic, but might really be something I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So that is possible now, whereas it wasn't really possible before. Radio was expensive to do relatively, and there's a limited amount of airtime. And so now the plus side, there's so many. There's ones that can appeal to any type of person. Downside is that there's a lot of clutter. It can take some serious homework to find the one that really that you're really looking for.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that is cool about podcasts, that they are so niche, so specific. In the topics or the format or the way they do things, that makes it so that folks can just really find something that they love, and almost like a cult following. Like there's some movies where people it's like, why do people like that movie? You know, but it's like this specific group of people just really resonates with it.
Yeah.
And I think podcasts are the same way.
Yeah. One downside for sure about podcasts and the fact that anyone can make one is oftentimes the audio quality can be really rough and really, really bad. In fact, it's kind of like that on purpose to some degree, because the best practice for podcasting is actually to compress your audio a lot, use very, very compressed, very small file types and everything. And that's good because, anyone can download them, especially early on. Your devices had such a smaller amount of space, so it was really important. To me, that is kind of a rough limiting factor, because in general, a lot of our other things are getting better and better quality. Yeah. But things could change easily. But right now, podcast audio quality can be rough depending on which podcast you're listening to. And even the great ones have to kind of compress their audio and have to lower a lot of standards just to make the file size manageable for a podcast. So that's a downside, I think.
That's all the technicalities or whatever.
Yeah.
I do think because it's 2018, I don't think folks have an excuse anymore as far as poor audio quality. Because if you have two people talking, I think that two people have been talking over a radio for many years. Yeah. I know that sometimes it's hard as far as like you don't want to invest in equipment, but I really do think it's at a point where there are some podcasts that I listen to that I'm like, these guys have a really significant following, and their audio quality is like terrible. So it's like that's kind of my biggest beef is like, how can you just get away with like it sounding terrible.
Yeah, I know.
But again, it's like that's just like splitting hairs, I guess, because then again, they have a lot of followers.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
it's not most people aren't like, oh my gosh, I can't listen to this because of their auto quote. Most of them are like, oh, I really like what they talk about. You know?
Yeah. Their content is on point enough for their audience that their audience doesn't care, which says a lot. You know, we might have the best quality ever, or we might be working toward that and have a very small audience. So.
We've got well, that's actually true, Jam.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh,
yeah,
high standards.
But I do feel overwhelmed. But I've also felt like I feel overwhelmed with the amount of podcasts. But I also had a realization like that at some point in high school or middle school where I realized, oh wait, there's also way more books in the world, many of them really good, than I could ever read in a lifetime.
Yep.
And so I think what's interesting about podcasts is it's the same thing. It's not quite as many as there are books, but there are tons of podcasts, and there's always new ones. What's exciting about that too is that the landscape of podcasting and popular ones and everything like that can change very rapidly. Like a podcast can be new on the scene and get a lot of attention very quickly. I think that's really cool. So for creators out there and people who have a really cool idea or whatever, there's so few barriers for them to execute that idea, which I think is only good in a society like ours that has so many people in it and has readily available technology. So
yeah, I agree. So to wrap up, let's just share some of our favorite podcasts. We thought it'd be fun to tell you guys that. And then, because I think one of the ways that I find out about new podcasts is through recommendations of friends. So, I mean, I consider you a friend, and I feel like you would say the same for me, and I feel like our listeners would consider us friends.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
please,
hopefully.
Mom.
One I definitely want to give a shout out to is Radiolab. It's a science and story-based podcast. I'd say it brings a lot of the best elements of what's possible with podcasting into one podcast.
Nice.
It's one of the first podcasts I ever listened to, and I got to meet the host and hear him speak recently, which was amazing. So,
whoa, fangirl.
Yeah, it was great.
A couple podcasts I listened to, Signpost with Russell Moore. It's pretty good. They're a little bit shorter, so I appreciate his shorter ones. I recently started listening to one where a guy does like a Survivor recap, and that's only because we're watching the season, and it's just interesting to kind of hear people's like exit interviews.
Yeah. Revisionist History, obviously I have to mention that one. That one's a really good one.
Oh, it's so good, guys.
And This American Life is a podcast staple. The StoryBased Podcast is really interesting. And a more niche one I really like is one called Bob Dylan Album by Album.
Wow.
And that's one of the examples of one of the niche interest ones. So
exactly. Yeah, the thing I like about Revisionist History too is that it's based off of seasons, so there's like time for you to catch up.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And if you're into weird stuff, the weirdest one I've ever listened to is called Love and Radio.
Nice.
It's very weird.
Sounds weird. Sounds like right up your alley. Last few that I like, the Soundtrack Show, really good. I love music, and soundtracks are really fascinating. Pass the Mic, which is cool cultural conversations. Highly recommend it. If you're into religious podcasts, The Bible Projects is really good. Ask Pastor John, although you can listen to his stuff elsewhere. And then How I Built This with Guy Raz.
Oh, yeah.
It's really good.
Very
I love
good.
hearing how these entrepreneurs are making things like Southwest Airlines. It's fascinating.
Yeah. It's a really good one. I have to second that one.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. Definitely take those up, and comment on our post once we share this. Let us know which ones you guys listen to. We're always looking for new ones that we can enjoy and kind of be in that niche following with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much, Chad, for suggesting this topic. And we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I think we can say that our consensus on podcasts is they're pretty dope.
Yeah. Podcasts. Radio reincarnated.
Podcasts. It's just people talking.
Podcasts. Anyone can do it, for better or for worse.
Oh, I forgot to mention Caliphate.